It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
July 20th, 1969, the iconic line delivered by astronaut Neil Armstrong after he became the first man to step onto the moon. Jump ahead to today, and final preparations are underway for the historic launch of NASA's Artemis II mission, the first crewed trip toward the moon in more than 50 years. 4 astronauts will blast off aboard the Orion spacecraft, powered by the most powerful rocket ever built, for a 10-day journey, passing the moon and then making a U-turn back to Earth. The mission will test critical deep space systems in order to pave the way for future moon landings, perhaps in the near future. Liftoff scheduled for 6:24 p.m. Eastern at Florida's Kennedy Space Center. Joining us now from Cape Canaveral, Democratic Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona. He's a member of the Armed Services Committee and served as a captain in the U.S. Navy. He also, of course, a former NASA astronaut himself, who visited the International Space Station 4 times. Senator, thanks for being with us on this special day today. I'm curious, because you're one of the few people on Earth who knows the feeling, what those astronauts must be feeling themselves as they wake up this morning.
Well, Willie, I'm sure they're incredibly excited. I know I am, and I'm not launching off pad 39 Bravo today. So, yeah, they're really excited. They're probably just getting up here in a couple hours. They've got a long day ahead of them, though. They'll be getting suited up this afternoon. They'll head out to the pad, I imagine, a couple hours before liftoff. And then it's going to be an incredible ride to low Earth orbit and eventually all the way to the moon and back. So I'm excited. I'm sure they are just incredibly excited that this day has finally come for them.
Yeah, an exciting step on the way to America's return to putting men and women on the moon. I think a lot of people who are paying close attention to this story may be asking themselves why we haven't been back to the moon in so long. So there's that part of it. And then the second part of the question is when we may go back. If this mission is successful as expected, when might American men and women walk on the moon again?
Well, I mean, it's hard to get to the moon, especially to get to the surface of it. It took a lot of time and effort and resources of our entire country in the 1960s. I was in kindergarten when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin first stepped foot on the moon. It was inspiring for me then, but it's been decades, many decades since we've been there. We're trying to get back. We have this effort that is going to, this flight this year. We'll have a couple flights next year to test the landing systems, 2 options, one from SpaceX and one from Blue Origin. And then in later years, we're going to send Americans back to the surface of the moon, hopefully ahead of the Chinese, and establish a lunar presence with people on the surface of the moon. It's inspiring, but it also pushes technology forward. And I think that's really an important thing for the American people to understand. It does take a lot of resources to do programs like this, but it is really only here in the United States of America that we're able to marshal those resources, that technical talent, the engineers and scientists we need to do this, to do hard things. And when we do hard things, we get a lot out of it.
So, Senator, there are many in government and in the private sector who view these moon missions extremely important, but also as a stepping stone, with the more ultimate destination being Mars some years down the road. Do you see that as something that is possible? And if so, why would it be so important?
Hey, when I was a kid growing up in New Jersey, I hoped I was going to be and thought I might be the first person to walk on the planet Mars. I didn't get there. I did make it into space 4 times, twice off of the same pad they're launching on today. But, that's a thing that is fundamentally human, right? We want to see what's over the next hill, what's across the ocean, what's on the surface of the moon, and ultimately sending people to Mars. I think it's just something we have to do. And I want to see Americans on Mars in my lifetime. I would love to be able to see that. It's a challenging mission. I mean, it's much harder than getting to the surface of the moon. So the plan here is over coming years and probably a couple decades, we're going to test the systems on the surface of the moon that'll help us get to Mars.
Senator, two-part question for you. The first part is, where do we get a nifty jacket like the one you're wearing? And secondly, could you speak to the work that's actually done and performed on an hourly basis on this trip around the moon?
Yeah, sure. So, the jacket I got when I showed up at NASA in 1996. So this has got some miles on it. And they're going to test the systems of Orion. They're also going to do some rendezvous and proxops, which is they're going to undock, from one piece of the system and fly around it to understand a little bit more about the flying qualities of Orion next to another spacecraft. They'll test procedures, including emergency procedures. And then, ultimately, after several revolutions around the planet, they'll burn their engines and get on what's called a translunar injection trajectory to go 4,000 miles on the other side of the moon. And that's what's going to make this flight rather unique. These 4 astronauts, Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen, will be the humans that have traveled furthest from the Earth.
There's something undeniably powerful about watching humanity return its attention to the moon, especially when you think back to Apollo 11 moon landing and that first step taken by Neil Armstrong. But what makes this moment different isn't just the nostalgia, it's the context. This isn't a symbolic race the way it once was. It's a complicated mix of ambition, competition, and long-term uncertainty about where space exploration actually fits in our priorities. On one level, missions like Artemis 2 feel like a natural continuation of human curiosity. The desire to explore, to push boundaries, to go further, that's deeply embedded in how progress happens. And there's no denying that these programs drive innovation. The technologies developed don't stay in space. They filter back into everyday life in ways most people don't even notice. But there's another layer to this that's harder to ignore. Space exploration today isn't just about discovery, it's also about positioning. Nations aren't simply trying to reach the moon, they're trying to establish presence, influence, and even future control over resources. The idea of getting there before someone else echoes the past, but with more complex geopolitical undertones. What's interesting is how this ambition coexists with very real challenges on Earth. When people hear about billions being spent on rockets and lunar missions, it naturally raises questions. Not because exploration isn't valuable, but because the trade-offs aren't always clearly explained. The justification often leans on inspiration and long-term benefits, but those can feel abstract compared to immediate concerns people deal with daily. At the same time, dismissing these missions as unnecessary would miss the bigger picture. History shows that major leaps forward often come from taking on projects that seem excessive at the time. The issue isn't whether we should explore, it's whether we're being honest about why we're doing it. Ultimately, this new chapter in lunar exploration sits at the intersection of science, politics, and identity. It reflects both the best and most complicated parts of human ambition. The real question isn't just whether we can go back to the moon, but whether we truly understand what going back means this time.